a person of faith, a Christian. I'd venture to guess most of you at home are too. But what if I told you that the business of religion might not be as holy, pure, and godly as we would all hope? Did you know in 2021 alone, it's estimated that $53 billion was stolen from churches by staff members? The current legal framework in the U.S. does not mandate religious nonprofits to disclose their financial details to the IRS or to the public. So while faith and religion and holiness will always be worth defending, is the business of religion in some cases a dirty one? Well, my guests today are pulling back the curtain on it all with their 7-part docuseries available July 10th.
From an investigator standpoint, you're looking at what drives this machine. And what drives a machine so often is tithes.
Tithing is a test. He gave his son, and you want to argue about 10%.
We've got about 1.8 million nonprofits registered with the IRS today. Over $4 trillion in assets.
You have the for-profit world, you have the nonprofit world, and inside that nonprofit world, you have religious nonprofits or churches.
How do you stop people from taking the money out of the organization to the people who are controlling it?
Greetings, Father. I've come to request an indulgence for my mother.
Within the church, is tithing voluntary or is it compulsory? Does a 990 tell you how much equipment they have?
They have $111 million worth of aircraft.
We do not want this church or any other church destroyed or intimidated by the government.
Joining me now is director and executive producer of the Religion Business docuseries, Nathan Apffel and Chris Ayoub. I'm very interested in this. Now, again, as I said in the opening, this is not supposed to be an attack on faith, an attack on religion. This isn't religion is bad. This isn't anything about that. What you all did here is you said there's a lot of people that want to practice their faith. They want to worship. They want to give it all to God and Jesus Christ and the Lord. But they might be giving it to people that are driving a Rolls Royce, okay? So let's get down to the bare bones of it. Where did you all start in this pursuit, and why was it important to expose this?
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I was raised in the megachurch scene in Los Angeles. Love Christ, love God, but just through about 20 years of experience, some things just started rubbing me wrong. And so I started asking questions, and as soon as you ask one question, 3 or 4 follow up behind it, and no one's answering those questions. And so I started the show 15 years ago, and it took me 15 years to really tell this story, because you're unpacking, 200 years of legal precedent in the U.S., but then 3,500 years of religious precedent. And so if I was making a show on Apple, I'd be researching 40 years, but we have to research 3,500 years to understand why people give money, how pastors ask for money. And so it is a massive rabbit hole that took almost 2 decades to unpack.
That's a lot of work. And I would venture to guess it's not easy to get the answers. As you mentioned, I'm guessing it took a lot of digging to get to that. There's a lot to kind of go through here, because when we talk about mega churches, I mean, mega churches exist for every faith, but when you think mega church, you kind of think like the televangelists that are on the TV every Sunday, and they got these huge congregations and they got a lot of money. We don't know where it came from. And most people are a little skeptical of that. Some people love it. They revere it. I've always been skeptical. I'm like, this seems like a little much. But when we talk about the money and the religion business, what does that entail if you were able to just encapsulate it into a nice little box for us?
Wow, that's tough to put
it's
it all in a box.
It's a lot to do. You can, a couple of boxes is fine.
I would say that people, if you look at it from the world, you've got predatorial type people and you have prey. And people come into the religious institutions that they're very vulnerable, and they could easily be manipulated. I mean, we've heard you will be removed from God's list of children if you don't tithe. We've heard you won't be protected on the day of vengeance. You're not obedient to God. Therefore, you need to give 10%. This is about obedience. And people end up feeling like they have to buy their way in. And I've seen sad stories. One when I first started on this journey with Nathan over 2 years ago, we just had launched our social channels, and someone reached out to us and said, hey, my mom tithed 10% consistently. And then she got cancer and was dying, couldn't work anymore. And then when she went to the religious institution, the church, to ask for help, they didn't know her. And it's built off of that, and it's darkness. There's no transparency in the systems at all. So a secular nonprofit files a 990 with the IRS, revenue, expenses, top people's salaries. Not perfect, but there's some transparency there. A religious organization, as you said in the intro, doesn't turn anything in. So where there's darkness, people who like doing evil deeds stay in that darkness. They don't walk in the light because God's light.
So mega churches. Is it just the mega churches that are susceptible to this? Or you think about a little country church? I would venture to guess it's not as bad, but what's your experience been in unraveling all of this? Like, who is, I guess, the most guilty of this dirty business?
So you just go straight to the punchline. You talked about that box, define the box. That mega church, the pastor has 3 private jets and they generate $60 million a year or $70 million a year, plays by the exact same rules that your small little 40-person rural country church does. And so we go down to the bedrock. I'll quote the Bible. What is your house built on? Is it built on sand or on rock?
Yeah.
And so our goal was to go to the rock, which is the legal structures in the U.S. Every single religious institution, so this isn't just Christian, this is Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, they all play by the exact same rules in the exact same box. So it all comes down to the morality and integrity of leadership. And we always say one thing, humans will human. If you give me the opportunity to take advantage, I'll eventually do it just because I'm around that system and around that pattern and precedent. And so every single religious institution plays by the same rules.
So I would venture to guess it's a lot like politics, where you got people that want to go into the ministry because they're well-intentioned and they want to preach the gospel and the word of God. And then they see the dollar signs, and then it becomes hard to look away from that. And then it starts to motivate you, and the greed overtakes you, which is so contradictory to the actual gospel and the actual word of God. But humans are going to human, as you mentioned. So when you see this and the work that you've done to put this docuseries together, is there a certain personality type that more so gravitates towards this type of behavior?
Yeah.
And how do you distinguish a pastor who really is just doing the job because they want to be doing the job and somebody who maybe has been sidetracked with the dollar sign?
Nathan, I know you about the study you did on the personality profile, if you want to do that. And then I'd love to tie in as well, too.
Yeah, there's a book called The Wisdom of Psychopaths.
Oh.
And it's a clinical doctor who studies psychopaths, from mass murderers to CEOs, and it's a personality type. And out of the top 10 job titles for psychopaths to take, clergy is one of them. And so it's a natural, in modern day clergy, so it's a natural position for someone who wants the limelight, wants power, wants authority to step into. And they'll always justify it, right? As I want to do God's work. But the system we've built in the U.S. in particular around church kind of attracts literal clinical psychopaths as leaders of the church. And this also includes doctors and CEOs. And so I'm not saying the idea of a psychopath is necessarily bad, but when you put someone with that character type into power, and then to your point about politics, politicians are one of them as well, where there's no accountability, no transparency, and no external oversight, that psychopath will end up doing psychopathic things more often than not.
But you can vote out a politician.
Can't vote out a
Can't
pastor.
really vote out a pastor, can you?
We've got bylaws of a pastor that says they can never be removed. Their board their board listens to them, and then upon their death, they will appoint the heir to take over the business.
Wow.
So it's a dictatorship. It's crazy.
Yeah, and like a monarchy too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when we're talking about the pastors, I know that you wanted to kind of build off of that in the personality type, or maybe what you think motivates somebody to move away from the good deed to the good money.
So good intentions pave the way to hell. I'm not saying people get in there for the wrong reasons at all. And what ends up happening is when there's no transparency into a system, there's none. There can't be accountability. If you don't know what the numbers are and you don't know what's going on, how could anyone ever be held accountable for it? So it's this big sandbox where people can play in the dark, and then if you ask any questions, they can easily say, and they do, you're trying to tear down God. And be very clear here, we love God. We love Jesus Christ. He's our Lord and Savior. We're here to encourage your faith with our Creator. And we're here to tell you to give generously with transparency, not to just give generously without. And we're hopeful that with the docuseries, people will start to ask really good questions, because a lot of people have been taken advantage of for a long time. 6% of every dollar donated actually ever leaves the institutional walls for outside impact. And so when you take a look at that and you ask a question like, how can you tell between the good and bad? I mean, Jesus said, you'll know them by their fruits. If they're up here, look at me, oh, touch me, you just touched the hand of God, and I'm blessed, and I got 3 private jets, I got 37 Breitling watches, and you're saying that to people who are barely making ends meet, and they're giving you 10% of everything that they make. You will know them by their fruits.
In doing this exploration, is there some big names that you want to just go right for the jugular on, so to speak? It's like, hey, these people, they're the worst of the worst. If you're going to this mega church, beware.
No, actually, because I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And so I always say we're all byproducts of the system we're born and raised in. And so these megachurch guys, Copeland, Kenneth Copeland, who, won't fly in public jets because there's demons in the tubes, he was tutored and mentored, and he was the pilot for Oral Roberts, like the OG evangelist. So he was just brought up with this system in mind, and this is how he was raised. And so a lot of people are like, oh, why are you attacking specific pastors or specific denominations or specific churches? And I say, we're not. What I've uncovered is there's 10 major loopholes in the IRS regulations where almost $200 billion a year, billion in individual donor dollars, just goes and disappears. And so we profile these 10 loopholes, but then I need examples. And so this is where it gets fun, is then I find, let's call it the most frivolous player of that loophole, and then I get to play with them. And then then I reach out. We always would call them or their lawyers, and then usually their lawyers respond. And so it creates a very entertaining side of the show, because we've had guns waved in our faces and little rent Amazon cops show up, and we've been arrested, and it's been really fun.
For asking questions.
Oh, yeah, just for asking questions, yeah.
And we donated to these organizations also, because we if you're donating money, you absolutely have the right to ask questions. This is a nonprofit. Right. It's not owned by an individual.
So we play the system, right? There's this thing that you learn about in the show called the 14-point checklist, and it's an IRS document that says, okay, if you want to be a church and receive tax exemption, these are 14 points that you kind of want to hit. You don't need to hit them all, but you should hit the majority of them. And so we play by those rules. And so we're, as a production company, we're just playing by the rules of the system. So we become members of your church, we'd give to you, and then we'd raise our hand and say, hey, we have a question. And they wouldn't ever follow up. And then we just go down that rabbit hole.
So you're asking the pastors themselves?
Anybody at the church that would speak, but no one would ever speak.
Yeah.
Not a single person.
Did you discover that who's the head of the operation? Is it the pastor? Is there somebody else? Is there a middleman there? And I'm sure for every church it's different, every situation is different, but the majority of the issue, do you think it sits right at the top with that pastor, that minister?
In the non-denominational space, yeah, most non-denominational churches take what we call like the CEO model, where the head pastor has all authority. And that's a problem, because you can never put one person with unlimited power at the top. And so we argue in the show that those systems, those type of institutions are actually breaking the law, because they are a corporation. So this is one question that I ask dozens of times is, what is a church? Is a church a business? And 99 out of 100 people will say no. And I say, but they file corporate documents with the state and oftentimes with the IRS that say they're a corporation. So they need to be ran like a corporation, which means you have a board of directors, but most of these don't have unbiased boards. It's their wife, their kids.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's a family business at that point in the non-denominational space.
So in this 7-part docuseries, I'm guessing you probably dive into a lot of different, I'm guessing primarily Christianity, but there's a lot of different churches, non-denominational, Baptist, I mean, you name it, that's there. So is there one sect or denomination that you find is the most egregious or that keeps turning up as a repeat offender in this space?
So the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it was on 60 Minutes probably about 2 years ago.
2019.
Yeah, 2019. And then what they had a investment fund, and that investment fund is valued at about $165 billion. And it is registered as an auxiliary to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Additionally, their overall value, and it's growing, is $265 billion. So if they have enough in assets to buy every team in the NBA over twice and still have money left over. And Nathan could touch on how they could operate in pretty much forever, but they still demand tithes.
Yeah, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the Mormon Church. They are, in my opinion, the biggest abuser of these loopholes and of the system. Because to Chris's point, they're going to hit $1 trillion in market assets in a decade. So they'll be one of the largest companies in the world, but they are a church.
What are they using that money for?
Absolutely nothing. So it literally, if let's say I'm the church and you're a member, which means you have to give me 10% if you want to get into heaven.
Yeah.
And so you give me your 10%, the church brings in so much revenues that it basically has a savings account. Well, it's just shoving all the money into this savings account. And so they are now, that savings account, it was 13 different shell companies, and they were disguising the fact that they were worth tens of billions at the time. So they were lying to the SEC and to their churchgoers, the givers. But that fund has grown so large now that they can't stop it. So they're basically in this, we present this in the show, they've reached what we call escape velocity. So they're making so much interest on their money that they would never need to take a single dollar of tithe giving ever again. They could fund the church in perpetuity and still be making tens of billions in interest every single year. So they've officially broken all rules of the game, all under the guise of religious tax exemption and salvation. And so here's the kicker. When you look at their investment fund, 2/3 of their assets are for-profit business assets. Only 1/3 is even remotely involved with the church. So that's like BYU, the university, that's their temples, that's their wards. So 2 out of every $3 are just in for-profit investments. And they're still registered as a church that pays no tax and has no obligation to file any financial documents.
Wow. A lot of people have been very curious about the Mormon Church, LDS, because of the number of reality shows, not just docuseries like yours, but I mean, you got reality shows, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, that's airing right now. That's a big deal. And people, they look at the lifestyle of people who live, especially that live in Provo or live near Utah, that are very entrenched in that community. And they all seem very wealthy, well off. And, they're getting brand deals from their little mom talk thing, but people ask questions. And then the word cult gets thrown out a lot. When you talk about the Mormon church or just churches in general, the word cult gets tossed out. And it's very offensive to people who are religious, very offensive to people who attend church. But in your exploration of all of this, do you think some of these churches are operating in cult-like ways in the way that they manipulate their members? Would you say that that's a fair characterization?
I mean, I would say there's tons of manipulation that's there. So from that standpoint, yes.
And I would say their businesses, they've branded Christ and they've repackaged him in whatever theological flavor you want. And then you only have so many consumers out there. We call it religious economic theory in the show. So my church is pitted against yours, is pitted against yours. And so now we're competing for customers. And in that competition, we've lost sight of Christ and what he called us to do. When you read the Bible, he gives very clear directives on where your generosity and giving should go. And like right now, if the global church squeezed $1, a penny would drop out of the bottom. Then that penny would go to where Christ told it to go. And then the other 99 cents are going to buildings, salaries, TV shows, private jets, marketing, brand deals, you name it. So yeah, we've created a system that's so expensive to operate in that you say, people are religious. I don't know if they are. They just enjoy, and I'm painting with a broad brush, but they just enjoy the experience of going to that entertainment venue, for lack of a better term.
So I've been really invested into, I guess what they are spending their money on or what they're getting money for, not just through their members, but also there's been a lot of reporting, at least over the last 5 years, about Catholic social services, other religious organizations getting grant money from the federal government for the migrants, right?
Yeah.
And we know that not only the late Pope, we don't know how this one feels about it, but Pope Francis, very much like we need to welcome in all the illegal aliens. And it's like, yeah, because the church is making a lot of money from the federal government, which leads me to believe, too, if you've got all this money from your members, why do you need to take money from the federal government to resettle migrants? That seems weird to me. That's skeptical. But in your docuseries, do you explore any of that at all? Like maybe these Christian or Catholic services, and especially when it comes to the migrant issue?
The migrant issue flared up, we were mid-production on that, but the episode 7 is I'll tell you this, I do feel like the launch of the show is divine in some sense, because I wanted to launch the show a decade ago, and it wouldn't have been, our audience would not have been primed for this. But episode 7 dives into the way the church and politics shakes hands on a lot of things. And I personally have come to the conclusion that because I had an individual from the CIA call me randomly, and he's like, look at this. And why would the government want to kind of, you explained it as a box. Why would the government want to create a box for all religions in the US to live within? Because real religion, like real Christianity, is quite dangerous, actually, because it pushes the envelope on a lot of different things. And so when the government can box in all faiths into a cookie cutter, sheet, then they can kind of control them. And I see it as there's this handshake that a lot of us don't even see happening in the background now, and billions are being handed off by the government to religious institutions.
What did the CIA want you to look into?
That 14-point checklist.
Okay.
They said basically there was a pastor who told me about it, and he goes, this is where we all point to, and then that led us down a rabbit hole to the IRS, the chief of the IRS, I can't remember his exact title, but he just presented this in the 50s, and the CIA agent was like, this didn't come from the IRS. And so that kind of meandered us down a couple different rabbit holes to say, why would the IRS and the government want to box religion into this very cookie cutter? You need a building, you need members, you need to meet once a month. It created this, bring everybody into the building as opposed to going out, as opposed to changing your community. Because I always say, how did a couple thousand early Christians transform Rome? That'd be me like dropping 2,000 people in the middle of LA and say, transform this city. You wouldn't be able to do it,
Yeah.
And so how did those early Christians transform Rome as they were being thrown to wild animals for sport and, being murdered? It's like there's something there. And so that's a dangerous crew to be having meandering through your town and culture, changing things.
So they want to keep a little leash on it. And then some people are invested in that because it's profitable.
And what's the leash? We'll give you 30% off. You won't pay taxes.
Yeah.
And so I always say the religious institutions have sold their soul for 30%.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when we're discussing this too, and you bring this to people who maybe are not open to what you guys were investigating, that are actually very, they're very defensive of it, and they don't like it, and they think that what you're doing is unholy or ungodly or an affront to their faith. What do you tell those people?
I mean, the first thing is like, when has transparency and accountability ever been a bad thing? Also saying, we're not here to attack your faith. Like, we believe in Jesus, and we believe in God, our Father, and ultimately, we want the authentic Christ to be seen, and that's where we're coming from. And we're not here to say stop giving, because there's a fear that, this is going to crush the institutional church and it's not going to be able to make money. I'm a firm believer that there'll actually be more money going in if there's transparency that's there, because I know I've been reluctant to give because I have a lack of trust with a lot of the institutions.
So is the solution for the government to act, for Congress to act? Or what is the solution?
We actually created a solution called Broken Shepherds. So we took a look at in Nathan's due diligence, the loopholes he mentioned, and created a platform that's a transparency, accountability, engagement, and donation platform where the nonprofits, both secular and churches, can provide data, financial data, so that congregants and members can see what's really going on, how's their money being spent. And the more transparent they are in their control of the transparency, and we're not here to be the arbiter of you should have a private jet or not. Let the person who's donating make that decision, and they get a light rating score on a 0 to 10 scale based upon how transparent they are. And we're shining a light into that because there's zero light in that sector.
And it's Hunger Games, basically. We scrape the government databases. So if you took that leash, if you got that collar on you, which is that 501c3 tax status, you're in our app whether you want to be or not.
Wow.
And so we've created the Hunger Games.
So could somebody look theoretically at any church and see where they stack up?
Yeah, so churches, like Chris had said, we have the secular nonprofit world in the app and then the religious exemptions. The secular world files what's called the 990, and it's just an informational document that you file, and so your donors can see kind of where your top line money goes. You don't get taxed on it. It's literally just saying, hey, if I raise $500 million a year, here's roughly where that 500 million went. Mm-hmm. Churches and religious organizations do not have to file that. So there's no legal document that they can ever be held to account for. And so this is where it gets wild is if you're a third-party auditor and you're like, Nathan, I want to look at your books, I'll just give you whatever I want to give you. I don't need to give you the real books. I can edit that general ledger. I can do whatever. And there's no outside document that I can be held to account for. And so it's much harder to wrangle the religious institutions. And so within the app, it's the Wikipedia of churches. So if I go to Tommy's church and I know your salary or I know your top line revenue, and I'm a real person on Broken Shepherds, I can edit your information until you claim your profile as the organization. And so it's the Wikipedia of churches. Yeah. So if I go to a church, I can input that data until that church claims that profile. And
wow.
Most people won't want, unverified data out there. So the goal is to say, hey, claim it.
Yeah. So you mentioned you've been arrested before.
Yeah.
I'm sure you both have been threatened.
Definitely.
It's crazy with godly people how they like to do some threatening. Most people might be a little bit surprised about that one, but detail some of that for me so my viewers and your viewers know what you had to go through to get this information out there.
Go ahead on your arrest stuff.
Yeah, we're threatening a $1.42 trillion a year market, and that doesn't include grants. That's just individual donor dollars going. Yeah. We're threatening an institution bigger than the military industrial complex. So there's a lot of people who don't want that money to dry up. And I'm not a guy that runs on stage or runs down the aisle in church services. We're very polite and respectful. And so, and I always say, my God's given me breadcrumbs to make this show. I'm a surfer from San Diego who never in a million years thought I'd be sitting here doing this. And so there's a pastor in Texas, and I randomly went to his church because I was going to churches all over the U.S. because I was just trying to feel out the Americana church. And
is this a mega church?
This is a mega church.
Do you want to name it?
Yeah, it's Fellowship Church, Ed Young Jr. And I go to one of his satellite campuses, and it's next to my dad's house in North Dallas. And I show up and grab a donut and a coffee, and I sit there, and he's on the screen, so he's not even there. And I go out to my rental car, and I fire it up, and it just kind of doesn't turn over. And I look under the car, and someone had cut the catalytic converter out of my rental car. And so I go inside, and I'm like, hey, I know there's a private lot, and I see cameras anywhere. Can I just get the camera feed for my insurance just in case they need it? And they're like, yeah, send a message through the website. So I send a message through the website. Tow truck comes, takes the car. Never hear anything. 3 months later, I send another message. Hey, can I get that footage? I was there. This is Nathan. Crickets. And so I send 3 messages, and about a year lapses, and now we're in the thick of the show. And this is probably 2.5 years ago, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just see if they'll want my money. And so at that point, they had taken down their message board, so you couldn't even message them. But they had they had a phone number for giving where you could give. So I called the number, and of course, no one picks up. But I'm like, hey, and I don't lie to anybody. I'm like, my name's Nathan. I've been there a bunch. I'm interested in giving you money, but I live out of state. Give me a call back. Within 24 hours, I had a message saying how I could give them land, jewelry, cars, money. And so they definitely want your money, but they're not willing to even help you with a security feed on a camera. So that made me start looking into this pastor. And I'm like, okay, this is shady. And in the meantime, we have multiple private investigators working with us. And so I'm like, hey, could you guys just steer some of your attention this way? And so they start pulling up some data. And here's a big note. Since there's no legal document that a church has to file, the only way data will ever come out is through lawsuits. And so there was a lawsuit that someone filed against the church. The church filed a lawsuit against one of their accountants because she had stolen $600,000 from the church. But what the church didn't realize is all that data becomes public when they sue another woman. And so I got their housing allowances. So this pastor in 2006 was paying himself $240,000 a year on top of his salary in what's called a housing allowance. So it's a tax-free stipend.
Okay, so he was paying himself $240,000 a year on top of his salary for housing.
For housing.
And so he could buy himself a new house every year.
Correct. And the congregation didn't know it.
Ooh.
So this is where it gets interesting, is there was like 30-something pastors on this list, including his son, all taking housing allowances. And so I wanted to know if it was factual. So I rocked up to his $6.5 million home in Dallas. That monthly mortgage is like $65,000 or $70,000. And I'm like, this is interesting. He's got a $70,000 mortgage here. And then my PIs go, oh, and there's a $8.5 or $9.5 million home in the Florida Keys that we just found. And so as soon as, like I said, as soon as you stick your head in that rabbit hole, it goes deep. So then I found out that the general counsel of the church, so that the lawyer that's on full-time paid staff, became ordained. And so he takes a housing allowance now. Not only that, but he became the CFO. So now the general counsel is the CFO running the purse strings of this church. That's a conflict of interest. And then he became ordained. Why would a lawyer need to get ordained unless on their housing allowance documents it says this is only for duly ordained and licensed ministers? So now this dude takes a housing allowance. And now Ed Young's wife takes a housing allowance. And so you better believe his housing allowances, these housing allowances are far bigger than in 2006, right? So that's what I wanted to know. I just wanted to know, hey, what's your housing allowance today? Because you're looking at about $15 million in real estate, and there's no way that $240,000 a year housing allowance covers this. So I called his lawyer, and the lawyer wouldn't call me back. So finally I flew to Dallas, and I called him once more, and I said, hey, I would love to talk. We're in Dallas, and I want to see you. And so he never called me back. So we knew it was going to be funny. And so I made these two little goofy signs that says, Ed, what's your housing allowance today? And then what's your salary? And they kicked me out of the church earlier because I went in asking who I could talk to about accountability. And this is my favorite part, is I walked in and within 60 seconds, they had me pegged. They had security surrounding me.
Yeah.
And I had no signs. I just walked into the church. And I'm like, I'm a paying member. Why are you kicking me out? And they're like, you know why, Nathan, and we don't have to tell you. And I'm like, I don't know why. Like, number one, I want to buy a sweatshirt. I'm in your shop. That ironically, the pastor designs these sweatshirts.
Oh.
And so I'm about to buy one of his designs. And I'm like, I want to get a cup of coffee and sit and listen to Ed preach. So they removed me. They wouldn't tell me why. And so I said, hey, who can I just talk to in regards to accountability in this document? And they said, no one. And so I left. But I don't take no for an answer. And so I went to my trunk and got the signs out. And literally, we just walked into the parking lot. Again, we're respectful, and we waited for everybody to leave. And instead of anybody coming up and talking to me, they had 20 armed security guards surround me. And they had me, first they assaulted me because their private security came after me. They said they owned the roads around the church, so my camera operators couldn't even go onto public sidewalks because they said they owned the roads. And then they had Grapevine PD arrest me. All for holding a sign.
Wow.
Yeah. And asking a question about a housing allowance that your congregation doesn't know. So.
Yeah. Are you ever worried about your life?
Yeah, I have security.
Yeah.
You have security from the church because you're worried about the church coming after you.
I've been followed. I know I've been followed. I've seen. I was in the military, so I know these things.
So I just want my audience to understand that you are a war veteran.
I am.
Okay. Who now has security because you've done a docuseries investigating accountability within religion, and now you believe you're being followed.
I know I'm being followed. I know I was, because right around that time, and I'm not going to reveal the pastor's name out of respect for the people who came forward, but somebody inside on the security side of one of these pastors reached out to us and said that we were going to need security. And then also said that there was a discussion about putting a hit out on me particularly. And then there was conversation about dig up, like a lot of money was spent, like $100,000 was spent up to dig out. So July 10th, whatever skeletons are in our closet these guys are prepping to try to smother us. And that's fine, but you're still not answering the questions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of look over your shoulder.
Absolutely.
Now, you guys have done a lot in the Texas megachurch community, which is sizable.
Yeah.
Other areas, is Texas kind of the heart of this? Or are there other places? You mentioned you kind of grew up in a megachurch in California.
Yeah.
Is the one that Justin Bieber went to?
No.
Okay.
We know Justin's pastor very well, though. He's in the show.
Oh.
But Texas in particular has specific laws and regulations that allow these churches and these psychopaths to play even darker. And so in Texas in particular, a private plane is considered a house of worship. So you don't pay tax on the jets.
Because there's demons in the tubes, right?
And so
Yes.
a lot of these character types will just end up in Texas because they can buy private jets and they don't pay tax on it. And so there's again loopholes in Texas that make it this like hotbed for characters like them.
So a private plane is a house of worship, huh?
Yeah.
I'm guessing a yacht would qualify.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
There's a lot of worshiping going on.
Yep, 100%.
You got the gun flashed on you at the airfield, didn't you?
Yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah. Yeah, we had, it's funny. Well, it's not funny. It's quite sad. Like, so a lot of these churches, and again, it's through good intentions. You know, I do believe most of these guys go into the ministry thinking they have good intentions, to where they end up driving like bulletproof Range Rovers and running over planter boxes to get away from me because I'm so terrifying, you know. But it's, what happens is they kind of fall into this system where they feel like they're doing the will of God, and so they need to like grow and expand, and hey, if I'm bringing in all this money, God's blessing me. Or you're just taking advantage of very vulnerable
They've
people.
convinced themselves that they've earned that, or that it's been anointed to them.
Yeah.
Yes.
But here's a great example. So as I was surrounded by those 20 security guards, my PIs or our PIs go immediately into recon work. Most of those guys can't even legally be carrying on that church premises because you need certain clearances and certain licenses to be private security. So the church, and we've talked to insurance companies about this, they're like, that is one of our biggest issues is most of these guys carrying guns at churches that think they're here to protect the body of Christ are actually putting the church in a very dangerous situation, because if there was a shooting and they weren't legally allowed to carry that, like conceal that, the church couldn't, their insurance wouldn't cover any of it. And so there's just these fascinating little hiccups. But so the Chris is talking about one specific instance where I love well-trained security because they know what they're doing. They don't break the law. And so at this one church in particular, these security cars pull up and they surround us and they're like, "What are you guys doing?" And you could tell they're professionals. So I'm talking to them, and out of the nowhere we hear this F-150 like running, like charging towards us, and it locks up in front of us and almost plows me and my camera operators over. And this guy gets out of the car and he flashes his badge like this, and he opens his jacket and his gun's like there. And I'm with a big YouTuber named Tommy G, and Tommy goes, let me see that badge. And he goes, "No." And he puts it away. So he was impersonating an officer.
Oh.
And the guy kept on flashing his gun though. And I'm like, "Why are you flashing your gun? We're just standing here." And the real security grabbed this dude and shoved him against his truck and was like, "Get out of here." Like you, because he grabbed both Tommy and I, which is assault. And so this is a problem, is these rogue cowboys, so to speak, put a lot of liability on these religious institutions because they think they're doing the will of God, but it's like, dude, you're protecting one of the most corrupt men in the U.S. You know, but that was
But probably getting paid pretty well to do it.
He lost his job. that
Wow.
He did say that the camera was more dangerous than his gun.
Yeah, he said,
That
"Your
says a
camera's
lot.
more dangerous than my weapon." And I said, "Ooh, really?"
Well, in some
Yeah,
regards, it could be.
for sure.
So this comes out July 10th.
Yeah.
So you think all hell is going to break loose, no pun intended, on July 10th?
Well, we always say we're pulling the pin on a figurative grenade and tossing it. And then the goal is we've worked years to manage the shockwave, which is the technology, because there's going to be a massive ripple. I mean, like we're taking down some of the biggest.
And you're naming names.
Naming names, naming 10. And I'll tell you right now, some are walking around on the White House lawns. So
Wow.
it goes, and some are some of the linchpins in the Christian world. Like
Wow.
their family dynasties are 40 and 50 years old. Yeah.
Wow. So on July 10th, we're all going to be watching the 7-part docuseries. Where will you two be? Will you be in a bunker?
No.
Where, you're just going to...
I firmly believe God, like we're on the right side with God here, and so God's got us, and like we're not.
Well, he's got private security.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to run away from this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not going to run away. We have been we've been there's been discussions about people wanting to take the show down, so we couldn't go off on distribution, right? We couldn't like distribute it the way a lot of folks have. We've had people that want to give us donations and want to invest in this. No, we're the only two, because no one's going to alter this message at all. We created our own streaming platform because we're going to have it on our own streaming platform. It's going to be through thereligionbusiness.com starting July 10th, and then a couple weeks after that, we'll flip it onto Amazon and others. But we want to make sure that our message can't be taken down because there are people who've already tried.
Sure.
Well, we are the like in regards to running to a bunker, we are the tip of the spear. Like we feel we're the tip of this reform spear, but it's been a really lonely road because we've had a lot of people threaten us and be threatened by us. But the closer we come to launch, we have massive people coming behind us now, being like, "Yep, you're right," and even sitting on the show. Like we were permanently banned on TikTok as child endangerment, which is sex trafficking. We're constantly shadow banned on Instagram. We were the pariahs for years. And now it's like people are starting to realize and say, hey, this is a problem. And so even though we're the tip of the spear, by July 10th, we have such a crew behind us now of really awesome, badass people that it's like, we're not afraid. We're pushing light into a dark system. And I think that's the right side of it. Every time that's happened in history, that's been on the right side of history.
Yeah. No, you guys are doing an amazing service, and people are going to be very shocked. Maybe not as shocked as we should be, but shocked by what they see. Yeah. So July 10th, they can watch it on
thereligionbusiness.com.
Thereligionbusiness.com, and then after that, they can watch it on Amazon.
Yeah, it'll be on Amazon, Apple TV, Roku, probably YouTube as well too.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I am excited. Thank you guys for spending so much time breaking it down for me. I could go on for another hour because I have a lot of questions, but I'll leave it there so they can watch the 7-part docuseries and get it all for themselves. And I'm guessing there'll be more to come after that. Your work is not done.
We've got episode 8 that's going to drop in about a year.
Wow.
And then we have multiple shows behind it. Basically, we're going after multiple legacy institutions.
This is more exciting than the second part of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And I am a reality TV junkie, and so if I'm telling you that, this is big.
There you go.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Tom.
Thereligionbusiness.com. Guys, you got to go to thereligionbusiness.com. They cannot be canceled. That is it for this very exciting episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. You can catch full episodes of this show on Outkick and Fox Nation, also on our YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.